Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. US President Donald Trump has paused tariffs on dozens of countries, instead imposing a blanket 10% import levy on trading partners. The US have, however, increased tariffs on China to 125%, warning the country not to retaliate. Following Trump's 90-day pause on many of his new tariffs, global markets have rebounded. Japanese and European markets jumped by between 5 and 8%, though US futures returned lower. US President Trump says that military action in Iran is absolutely possible if the countries can't agree on a nuclear deal. The US had earlier imposed further sanctions on Iran despite potential impending talks between the nations. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the US could revive bases with troops returning to the Panama Canal. It comes as the US and Panama signed a new defense and security pact amid what Hegseth calls growing Chinese influence in the region. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that Russia has dragged China into their war with Kyiv, saying there are more than 150 Chinese nationals fighting for Russia. China have earlier called claims from Zelensky baseless. German Conservatives under Friedrich Merz have announced a coalition to form the next government to deal with the SPD. Has been agreed with an aim to revive growth and tackle migration. US judges in Texas and New York have blocked deportations of alleged Venezuelan gang members under a rarely used wartime law. Last month, 238 Venezuelans were sent to prisons in El Salvador under the 1798 Alien Enemies Act. After massive market turmoil, President Trump has paused tariffs for countries, but not for China. The US-China trade war is escalating. Trump has announced an immediate 125% tariff hike on Chinese imports. This follows Beijing's retaliatory tariffs on American goods. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said China has shown a lack of respect for the world's markets. Because of that, I'm raising tariffs to 125%, effective immediately. At the same time, he confirmed a 90-day pause on tariffs for other nations. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says last week's tariffs were meant to bring countries to the negotiating table. Despite the escalation, Trump says he remains open to a trade deal. Meanwhile, Australia has rejected China's proposal to cooperate against US tariffs. Instead, it is working to diversify trade and reduce reliance on China. Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles said, "We are not going to be holding hands with China in any global contest." According to analysts, Trump's tariff hike could impact Australia. Nearly a third of its exports go to China, while trade with the US makes up less than 5%. Trump says he's open to a deal. The question now, how will China and other countries respond? Donald Trump's decision to delay severe tariffs on US trading partners while sharply increasing duties on China has intensified trade war tensions but fueled a wave of market optimism. In Asia, the stock exchange of Thailand is opening strong and continuing to climb as investors welcome the tariff suspension. The Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong is surging at the open and maintaining upward momentum throughout the session. Despite the sharp tariff hike on Chinese goods, Shanghai markets are opening higher and showing resilience. Taiwan's stock market skyrockets at the open, tracking the broader global upswing. Meanwhile, Tokyo's Nikkei is surging more than 8%, while Seoul and Singapore are each piling on more than 5%, and Sydney and Jakarta are gaining more than 4%. Tech firms are the standout performers, with Sony, Sharp, Panasonic and SoftBank chalking up double-digit gains, while airlines, car makers and casinos are also enjoying strong buying. Yesterday on Wall Street, the Nasdaq saw a dramatic surge while the S&P 500 rebounded sharply, marking one of its strongest performances in years. Tech stocks led the rally, pushing all sectors higher and driving widespread market optimism. Well, joining us to discuss the markets further is Rema Hans, our associate producer at NewsXworld. Rema, thank you for joining us. What can you tell us about the global market reaction to Trump's shock U-turn?
Right, thank you so much, Josh. So, first of all, I would like to take you through Nikkei. We are looking at Tokyo right here. So, of course, after the bloodbath that we have seen in the past couple of days after Trump's tariffs, Nikkei has gone up significantly, which is about 8.23%, which is about 2,609.15 pointers. The session is right now at 34,323.48, which is a significant increase as we have seen in the past couple of days. Moving on to Hang Seng, which is Hong Kong, it's gone up by 1.80%. There is some amount of recovery that we are seeing right here, and the session is at 20,628.86 as we speak, which is about 364.37, by which it's gone up. Moving on to Shanghai, despite the heavy tariffs on China, it's gone up by 0.93% and 3,200 and the session is right now at 3,216.41, which is about 29.60 points upwards. As of course, China's the US tariffs on China, which is right now at 125%. Despite that, there's some amount of stability that we are seeing. However, we will not be able to. We can't foresee whether it's going to go further or downwards. Now, moving on to Taiwan, it's at 19,011.56 this session, and as we are speaking, of course, it's constantly going up. The session is going up by 9.35%, and by 1,626 points. Moving on to the United States, of course, there has also been some amount of recovery that we are seeing here in Dow Jones. The session is right now at 40,608.45, which is about 7.87%, by which it's gone up 2,962.86, which is of course some amount of recovery that we are seeing, and it's likely to go up further as the markets open. S&P 500, right now the session is at 5,456.90. The markets, the stocks have gone up by 9.52%, which is about 474.13. Lastly, I would like you to take you through a NASDAQ, which is mostly your tech giants, and there you can see a significant increase, which is about 12.16% overnight, and the session is right now at 17,124.97, which is about 1,857 points upwards. Of course, in the following days after Trump's tariffs, heavy tariffs which has of course sent tremors globally, we have seen that the markets have struggled constantly. However, after the announcement of the pause of over 90 days, the markets, you can see that they are slowly, however, recovering. And of course, China, despite having 125% of tariffs, there's some amount of relief for the markets there. Back to you in the studio, Joshua.
Yes, thank you, Rema. A clear image coming from the stock markets, and that rebound has been seen globally. Well, joining us to discuss the rebound and also the decisions made by Donald Trump and his administration is Scott Faulkner, head of the Eagle Enterprises, a security firm based in Washington. He also joining us from Washington. Scott, before we look at these markets, let's look at this decision by Donald Trump. His aides have said this was the plan all along. Is that something you believe in?
Yes, I think that Trump has, if you read his book, The Art of the Deal, you're using carrots and sticks. And so if you look at his first term, there's a number of times where he would come forth with a very, let's say, brutal or pointed position and then back off of it because he was able to get what he wanted in the first place. And I think that's what we're seeing again, is that he wanted to shock the system, which he did. And 70 countries are now in negotiations with the United States to come up with a fairer trade arrangement. And that is exactly where he wanted to be. The stock market is always going to be reacting to things, but what Trump is really trying to do is reorient America's foreign policy, America's tariff policy, America's economic policy, and then also created America-centric world trade policies that literally have not changed since the 1980s. So this is going to take some time, and day-to-day fluctuations are something that Trump's willing to weather.
Yes, absolutely, Scott. The markets, of course, have bounced back, but there still will be an impact on Trump's actions. Do you think that the risk he's taken is worth it, given the fact that people have come to the negotiating table? And looking at the other side and the countries that are now looking at negotiating with Trump, do you think that there might be some feelings there of discontent, given that this may just have been a play from his book?
Well, I think that, since we're looking at a historic shift that goes back decades and is going to probably take years, if not decades, to realign, it had to require a shock to get everyone's attention and to basically lubricate the gears of negotiation. And Trump is very good at that. He's done that in foreign policy as well as economic policy over the years. And so in his second term, he's deciding to use his first 100 days in this way.
Yeah, that's absolutely, Scott. And I want to finally look, before we move on, at China. We know Trump has stepped up tariffs on China, now at 125%. How do you think that this ongoing trade dispute with China and the United States is going to play out?
Well, again, America, and I think this is where we get at least some bipartisanship in our country, that everyone views China as our threat, whether it is economic threat, whether it is health threat, as we did with the Wuhan COVID pandemic, as we look at a geopolitical threat with Taiwan, the South China Sea, that China needs to be reined in. And so what part of that is going to be non-military, and economics is clearly the way to go. America is really, even during the Biden years, I think, nervous that 80% of our pharmaceuticals, or at least the underlying ingredients for pharmaceuticals, come from China. And so we have some strategic and national security and even public health concerns of our dependence on China. And Trump is going to start with these opening salvos, so to speak, to try to wrench America away from its dependency on China.
Scott Faulkner, thank you for your insight on that. You will be, of course, staying with us, but the situation with Trump's tariffs continues to impact everyone across the world, whether that's China, Europe or beyond, and we will be across all of those developments as we get them. Moving to Latin America, and leaders on Wednesday have urged a united front to tackle US President Donald Trump's tariff onslaught and the economic uncertainty it has brought. The calls for unity of purpose were made in Honduras at a meeting of the 33-member community of Latin American and Caribbean states, also attended by China, seeking to replace the United States as the main political and economic influence in the region. Trump's tariffs on imports of non-US products, some of them suspended and altered numerous times, threaten economic disruption for CELAC economies. Mexico is the United States' biggest trading partner, while Brazil is its second biggest provider of steel. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva lambasted arbitrary US import tariffs at the summit. Meanwhile, Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico said that economies in the region must diversify their markets and focus more on integration and helping each other. Let's listen in to what the leaders have had to say.
Sin embargo, considero que hoy más que nunca es un buen momento para reconocer que América Latina y el Caribe requieren de unidad y solidaridad de sus gobiernos y de sus pueblos, a fin de fortalecer una mayor integración regional, siempre en el marco del respeto mutuo y la observancia de la soberanía e independencia de nuestros países y de los acuerdos comerciales que cada uno de nosotros.
Este sueño de la unidad de la patria grande es hoy más urgente que nunca. Cuando el viejo orden neoliberal impuesto a nuestros países colapsa y las grandes potencias como Estados Unidos redibuja su mapa económico sin preguntarse qué pueblos quedan atrás.
We move away from tariffs. In Dominican Republic, rescue workers have ended the search for survivors of the nightclub roof collapse as the death toll surpassed 180 in the Caribbean nation's worst disaster in decades. An official statement had earlier said that all reasonable possibilities of finding more survivors had been exhausted and the focus of the operation will turn to recovering bodies. Over 300 rescue workers aided by sniffer dogs had spent 2 days combing through mounds of fallen bricks, steel bars and tin sheets, supported by firefighters from Puerto Rico and Israel. Aerial images of the site showed a scene resembling the aftermath of an earthquake, with a gaping hole where the roof of the club, a fixture of Santo Domingo's nightlife for half a century, had been. Over 500 people were also injured when the roof caved in, while renowned merengue singer Ruby Perez was performing for a crowd of hundreds. Authorities have said it's too early to determine the cause of the disaster. Well, here's how family members are reacting to the tragedy.
Porque ayer nos pasamos el día de clínica en clínica, de hospital en hospital. Y en el frente del Jet también, buscando a nuestro hermano con la esperanza de encontrarlo con vida. Desgraciadamente esta mañana nos dijeron que todo estaba muerto. Lamentablemente ha ido mi hermano.
Estamos totalmente consternados, tristes, el corazón partido por este desastre, por esta tragedia que ha afectado a todo el pueblo dominicano.
We now move to Germany, and after weeks of political drift, the Conservative leader Friedrich Merz has unveiled a long-awaited coalition deal with the centre-left Social Democrats known as the SPD. The agreement sets Merz on course to become Germany's next chancellor following February's election, where his CDU party fell just short of a majority. The coalition aims to kickstart growth in Europe's largest economy amid rising fears of a global recession and escalating trade tensions driven by US tariffs. Key pledges include tax cuts for middle and lower income earners, cheaper energy and ramped up defence spending. A tougher migration stance and support for Ukraine's NATO bid also feature in the deal. Merz sent a clear message to Washington declaring Germany is back on track. Let's listen to what was said.
The key message to Donald Trump is Germany is back on track. Germany will fulfill the obligations in terms of defense, and Germany is willing to strengthen their own competitiveness. And that is not just Germany, that is Europe. The European Union and Germany will be again a very strong partner within the European Union, and we will bring the European Union.
Now, the deal must pass internal party approvals before Merz can take office. A new poll is showing the far-right AfD leading by a point, suggesting he'll face serious headwinds from day one. Well, joining us again to discuss this matter is Scott Faulkner, head of Eagle Enterprises, a security firm based in Washington. Scott, thank you very much for joining us. We have been expecting this coalition to be formed, but I just mentioned the AfD, who have been gaining popularity in Germany. What challenges do you think Friedrich Merz is going to face as he forms this government, specifically in Germany, first of all, with the political instability surrounding cost of living, migration and other key factors?
Well, certainly throughout Europe, we've been seeing this immigration issue being a driver that has affected a lot of different parliamentary elections in the last couple of years. So what Merz is really trying to do is steer a middle course. He doesn't want to go radical and that's why he chose the more, the left-wing coalition partner to come up with, 300 and I think about 26 seats that give more than a majority, as opposed to going with the far right. And so once again, we're back to the issue of, can you steer a course that is more centrist when you have radicals who are raising, in some cases, very legitimate concerns about immigration and some of the other issues? I mean, I think, on a broader scale, as America steps back in some parts of the world, especially in Europe and NATO, and looking upon the key allies of England, France, and Germany to take the lead in the security and economic vitality of Europe, these coalitions and these policies become even more important on a global scale than if America was still kind of a dominant player on that continent. So it's going to be interesting to see how Merz steps forward into this broader spotlight.
Absolutely. You mentioned some of the geopolitical challenges facing Germany, Europe's largest economy, also a key player in support for President Zelensky in Ukraine in their ongoing war with Russia. How do you think that Merz will tackle that continuing issue, and how do you think he will set out his stall in support for potential peace in Ukraine with Russia?
I think to some extent, Trump's effort to try to normalize Russia and bring him to the table seems to be faltering. So I think there's going to be a stronger effort to strengthen Ukraine's hand at the bargaining table, knowing that a bargaining table is probably the case. Unless Europe or the United States came in with far more military support than they've provided so far, we're dealing with kind of a stalemate that is still really a stalemate. There are days that looks like Ukraine's got the upper hand, other days when Russia seems to have the upper hand. So I think that Germany, being the largest power in Europe and also expanding its military, is going to be a key part to hopefully strengthening Zelensky's hand as we move toward the negotiations, which may or may not happen sooner rather than later, because Putin still thinks he can wait everybody out. He still thinks between North Korean troops, and there's even been some captures of supposedly some Chinese troops, that he's going to be able to win the attrition war over Ukraine. And so we need to find some way to bring Putin into the reality that he's got to cut a deal, because he's never going to win.
Yes, Scott, we are running short of time in this discussion, but very briefly, how important is Merz's relationship with Trump, with the ongoing global instability on economics and also in regards to the ongoing war with Russia and Ukraine?
Yeah, well, I know that Merz has had a couple cross words with Trump, but I think behind the scenes he realizes that they're on the same side. Europe, Germany in particular, and America's on the same side in terms of wanting a stable world, wanting a peaceful world, and wanting a world that is more freedom-oriented than tyranny-oriented. So at some point, those basic ideals and basic beliefs are going to win out.
Scott Faulkner, thank you very much for your time and also for your insight. We do move on. And US President Donald Trump has repeated his threat to use military force if Iran does not agree to end its nuclear program. Trump said Iran could not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon, and if it declined to stop development efforts military action could follow. Iran, which has pushed against Trump's demands in recent weeks, said indirect talks would be held in Oman. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has also emphasised that a deal is possible only if the United States agree that there can be no military operation. Trump, who pulled the United States out of a 2015 nuclear deal between Iran and world powers during his first term, earlier warned that Iran would be in great danger if talks were not successful. Meanwhile, Trump has also said that Israel would be the leader of a potential military strike against Iran if Tehran doesn't give up its nuclear weapons program. Let's listen in.
It's a start.
Do you have a timeline?
We have a little time, but we don't have much time
Who is starting the
because we're not going to let them have a nuclear weapon.
Is
Can't
it
let them have a
awkward to
nuclear
be
weapon.
there, Mr. President?
And we're going to let them thrive. I want them to thrive. I want Iran to be great. The only thing they can't have is a nuclear weapon. They understand that. You know, the people are so incredible in Iran, and they're so smart. They're very smart people. But, you know, they're in a rough situation, But with Iran, yeah, if it requires military, we're going to have military. Israel will obviously be very much involved in that. He'll be the leader of that. But nobody leads us. We do what we want to do. That's because when the election was rigged, I figured they'd get the weapon.
Well, ahead of the talks with Iran, the United States have issued fresh sanctions targeting the country. The US Treasury Department, in a statement, said it imposed sanctions on 5 Iranian-based entities and 1 person based in Iran for their support of the nuclear program, with the aim of denying Tehran a nuclear weapon. The action comes after Trump made a surprise announcement on Monday that the United States and Iran were poised to begin direct talks on Tehran's nuclear program. But Iran's foreign minister said the discussions in Oman would be indirect. That is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more of the latest breaking news from across the world.